What happens when one of the most beloved musicians in history sits down for what should be a simple morning chat, only to face a barrage of personal attacks and disrespect that crosses every line imaginable? It only took 39 seconds of pure condescension for a television host to destroy her own career and send a legend walking off her set in disgust. The studio lights were bright that morning. Paul McCartney walked onto the set with that familiar smile, the one that had charmed millions for decades. He was there to talk about his latest project, a documentary celebrating his musical journey. It was supposed to be light, fun, nostalgic. Lorraine Kelly sat across from him, her notes spread out on the small coffee table between them. As the cameras began rolling, everything seemed perfectly normal. "Paul, welcome to the show," Lorraine said, her voice carrying that practiced cheerfulness that morning. Television hosts perfect over years of practice. "Thank you for having me," Paul replied, settling into his chair. "It's lovely to be here. So, let's talk about this documentary of yours." Lorraine glanced at her notes. "You've had quite the career, haven't you? Though, some people might wonder if you're just trying to stay relevant at this point." Paul's smile faltered slightly, but he recovered. "I suppose I'm just doing what I've always done, making music and sharing it with people who want to listen." Right away, Lorraine leaned back, crossing her legs. "But you're what? In your 80s now? Don't you think it's time to let the younger generation have their moment? How many times can you tour the same songs?" The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the warm, fuzzy interview they expected. Paul maintained his composure. "I tour because people still want to hear the music. The shows sell out. Fans from all generations come together. And that's something really special." "Sell out? Come on," Lorraine said with a dismissive wave. "Let's be honest, people are coming for nostalgia. Not because you're doing anything new or groundbreaking. You've been riding on the coattails of the Beatles for what, 60 years now?" Paul took a slow breath. "The Beatles were a collaboration. What we created together was special. But I've also had a successful solo career. Worked with Wings, experimented with different genres. I've never stopped creating." Lorraine laughed, but it wasn't warm. "Successful solo career? That's generous. Without John Lennon, would anyone really care about what you were doing? Let's face it, he was the real genius of the group." Paul's eyes narrowed slightly, but his voice stayed steady. "John was incredibly talented, and I miss him every day. But we wrote together. We inspired each other. It wasn't about one person being better than another." "Oh, please," Lorraine interrupted, flipping through her notes. The crew exchanged shocked glances. This had gone beyond provocative questioning into something else entirely. Something ugly. Paul straightened in his chair, his expression hardening. "I think you're being incredibly disrespectful, not just to me, but to the legacy of the band and to John's memory." Lorraine waved her hand as if swatting away his objection. "Disrespectful? I'm just asking the questions everyone's thinking. You've made millions, probably billions, off songs written when you were young. Now you're just an old man clinging to past glory. Don't you have any shame?" "Shame?" Paul repeated, his voice quiet but firm. "I'm proud of everything I've accomplished. I've worked hard my entire life, and I've never taken for granted the connection I have with people through music." Lorraine pressed on, leaning forward. "You haven't really worked, have you? You stumbled into success as a young man, had everything handed to you, and now you just collect checks from the same old songs. Real artists evolve. They grow. They challenge themselves. You just play yesterday for the millionth time and call it a career." Paul's hands gripped the armrest of his chair. "I've written hundreds of songs. I've explored classical music, electronic music, collaborated with artists across every genre. If you'd done even basic research, you'd know that." Lorraine smirked. "Oh, I did my research, Paul. I know all about your little vanity projects. The classical albums that nobody listened to. The experimental stuff that went nowhere. It's all just desperation, isn't it? Trying to prove you're more than just the guy who got lucky in a band. 60 years ago. Lucky?" Paul's voice rose slightly. "You think it was luck? We practiced for hours every day, played tiny clubs in Hamburg, worked ourselves to exhaustion to get where we were. Luck had nothing to do with it." Lorraine examined her nails, as if bored. Sure. But let's talk about your personal life, shall we? 3 marriages, was it? 4? I lose count. That's not exactly good judgment." Paul's face flushed. "My personal relationships are none of your business, and they have nothing to do with why I'm here today. Everything's my business when you sit in that chair, Lorraine shot back. You're a public figure. The public has a right to know that behind all the nice guy image, you're just another celebrity who can't keep a marriage together. I've loved and lost like many people, Paul said, his voice tight. I've also found happiness. But again, this has nothing to do with the documentary. Lorraine laughed that cutting laugh again. The documentary, right? A vanity project where you get to rewrite history and make yourself look like the hero of every story. Did you pay people to say nice things about you? Because I can't imagine anyone genuinely thinking you're as important as you seem to think you are. Paul stood abruptly, his microphone pack tangling slightly. I've had enough of this. I came here for a professional. The crew had stopped pretending to work. Everyone was frozen, watching this confrontation unfold. Lorraine's face turned red. Get out. Get out of my studio right now. I'm already leaving, Paul said, pulling off his microphone pack and dropping it on the chair. I don't need to subject myself to this kind of treatment. I've faced actual challenges in my life, real hardships. And I'm not going to stand here and let you talk to me like I'm nothing. You are nothing without the Beatles. Lorraine shouted after him. You're a footnote in music history pretending to be a legend. Paul stopped at the edge of the set and turned back. You know what the saddest part of all this is? You could have had a lovely conversation. You could have asked about the documentary, about the stories behind the songs, about the incredible people I've worked with. Instead, you chose to be mean, spirited, and small. That says everything about you and nothing about me. Don't you dare lecture me, Lorraine snapped. I built this show from nothing. I earned my place here. And you've just thrown it all away? Paul said quietly. Because this right here, this is what people will remember. Not your years of work, not your other interviews. Just this moment where you forgot basic human decency. Lorraine crossed her arms. The public will side with me. They'll see you for the entitled celebrity you really are. Walking off when things get a little challenging. Challenging. Paul shook his head. You called my life's work worthless. You mocked my marriages, my age, my talent. You've shown nothing but contempt from the moment I sat down. If you think that's challenging journalism, you're deluded. Get security. Lorraine called out. I'm going. I don't need an escort. I know my way out, Paul said. He paused, taking one last look at Lorraine. I genuinely hope you think about what happened here today because you've hurt yourself far more than you could ever hurt me. With that, he walked off the set. The studio fell into stunned silence. Lorraine stood there, chest heaving, clearly expecting support. But the crew looked at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Finally, one of the cameramen spoke up. My mom loves Paul McCartney. She's going to be devastated when she hears about this. Oh, for heaven's sake, Lorraine muttered. It's just Paul McCartney. There are plenty of other musicians in the world. Not like him, the cameraman said quietly. He's special, and you treated him like garbage. Lorraine spun to face the producer. Are we going to air this, or? Lorraine's voice fell. So what happens now? The producer checked her phone. The network wants to see you immediately. Lorraine felt her stomach drop. They're going to fire me, aren't they? I wouldn't want to be in your position right now, the producer said. You're talented, but today you forgot the basic rule of interviewing. Treat your guests with respect, especially when you're asking difficult questions. You succeeded at being memorable, but not in the way you wanted. The studio began to clear out. Crew members gathered their equipment, avoiding eye contact with Lorraine. She stood alone in the middle of the set, the bright lights shining down on the empty chair where Paul McCartney had sat just minutes before. This was supposed to be a good day, she whispered. But it wasn't. Across town, Paul McCartney was in his home studio, guitar in hand. Music had always been his refuge, his way of processing the world. His fingers found familiar chords. And he began to play, not thinking about Lorraine Kelly, not thinking about the interview, just letting the music flow the way it always had. This was who he was. Not the target of misplaced anger. Not a has-been clinging to past glory. A musician who'd spent his life creating beauty and sharing it with the world. That was his legacy. That was what mattered. Back at the studio, Lorraine sat in a conference room, facing 3 network executives. Their expressions were grim. Do you understand the gravity of what happened today? One asked. Lorraine nodded. I do. I made a mistake. More than a mistake, another executive said. You verbally attacked one of the most beloved musicians in the world on live television. Social media is exploding. This isn't just a mistake. This is a disaster. I know, Lorraine said quietly. I just kept pushing and couldn't seem to stop myself. We need to know why. Why Paul McCartney? Why did a third executive asked. I wanted to prove I was still relevant, Lorraine admitted. I could create moments that people would talk about, but I went about it completely the wrong way. Yes, you did, the first executive said. And now we have to decide what to do about it. The show is suspended, the second executive said. We need time to assess the damage. And you? Lorraine knew the answer. I'm out. The third executive nodded. We just need to work out the details. Lorraine stood on shaky legs. For what it's worth, I am truly sorry. Not just for the damage to the network, but for how I treated Mr. McCartney. He deserved better. Across the city, Paul sat quietly, relieved he had stood up for himself. Even after decades of accomplishments, there were still people who tried to tear him down. But he had dignity. He had strength. And in the end, that was enough. Music filled his studio once more. The notes carried through the quiet room. A reminder that what truly mattered was the life he'd built, the art he'd shared, and the joy he'd given the world, not the cruelty of one misguided interview. And somewhere, Lorraine Kelly had time to reflect on the consequences of letting ego override professionalism, learning far too late that aggression is never a substitute for respect.